Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week, reaction from NORML's political director Morgan Fox in Washington, D.C. on the results of the presidential election. Will total Republican control of the government be the key to getting reform right at the federal level?
But I don't think that GOP control of all three chambers is necessarily a good thing for comprehensive descheduling legislation. I think that there's just too many GOP lawmakers who just quite aren't there yet.
Legalization loses on 3 state ballot questions, including Florida, South and North Dakota, while Nebraska approves a medical program bringing decriminalized states in the U.S. up to a total of 39. Kentucky issues its first licenses for its medical program and gets welcome approval from over 100 cities and counties. And in Massachusetts, after 11 months, the Bay State finally names an executive director to the Cannabis Control Commission. He's David Lakeman, and he returns from a few years in Illinois and at their Cannabis Commission. Plus, in Texas, Dallas joins another 5 cities or towns in the Lone Star State to decriminalize possession of cannabis. And since 2017, the premier growing and manufacturing competition in New England is the annual Harvest Cup in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Boston-based corporation will cannabis.
Plus, a Gallup poll concludes that more Americans are using cannabis now than ever before since legal states and medical programs continue to expand. All that and coast-to-coast election reaction on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto. Next.
We are Pro-Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro-Cannabis Media's weekly production of news from the cannabis industry. I'm Elena Pinto. Remember, once again, the easiest way to continue to watch our weekly roundup of the news is just to download our free app, PCM TV. You can get it at the App Store and Google Play. Our top story this week is the results of the 2024 election and its impact on the cannabis industry. And unless you've been stoned out of your mind over the past week, you know that former President Donald Trump defeated Vice President Kamala Harris pretty decisively as Trump won both the popular and the electoral vote. Needless to say, it's been a tough week for the industry since Harris ran on legalization of cannabis while President-elect Trump jumped on the weed bandwagon late. Trump said he would vote yes on 3 in his home state of Florida, thus going against that state's governor, Ron DeSantis, a Republican who was fighting for the ballot question to fail. Trump did say he would support decriminalization and rescheduling to the CSA's Schedule 3. He also stated that no one should be going to jail for using the product and that his home state of Florida is trying to do it the right way. However, the industry is asking, is this the end of the legalization fight, or just another delay in the inevitable move to reflect the 70% of Americans who support legalization of the plant? Well, the red wave that swept the country also won the Senate, but control of the House is still up for grabs at the time of our recording on Monday, November 11th. Our man in Washington, D.C. is Andrew Barringer, who tries to put this political defeat in perspective while hoping that President-elect Trump will make good on his campaign promises.
I'm Andrew Barringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The election is finally over, everyone. Thank God. Former President Donald Trump has unveiled new ideas about cannabis policy following his recent election victory, marking the first time that both major party presidential candidates have supported some form of cannabis legalization in U.S. history. That's a pretty big deal. Now, the president-elect's new approach centers on a 3-pronged strategy. Now, continuing with the Biden administration's efforts to reschedule cannabis, as we know, to a Schedule 3, supporting banking reform for the industry, and maintaining states' rights in cannabis policy decisions is very important. This represents a dramatic evolution from his first term, during which his administration, if you remember, under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, had created industry uncertainty by rescinding Obama-era cannabis enforcement guidance and laws. Quote, medical cannabis has been absolutely amazing for patients, Trump stated during his campaign recently, while arguing against criminalizing personal possession. Someone, quote, someone should not be a criminal in Florida when this is legal in so many other states, end quote. He added, showcasing his support for state-level decision-making recently in the Florida cannabis election on the ballot. The Republican approach focuses on establishing a clean cannabis reform framework, emphasizing free market principles and, of course, reduced federal oversight. Now, if we look at it, key elements include removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, very important, creating an alcohol-style federal framework, and enabling interstate commerce. However, implementation faces several hurdles. If you remember, the DEA hearing delays could push changes into 2025 or beyond, and the complex process of banking integration remains a big challenge, as we know. The industry will need to adapt to a more market-driven approach. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this topic? Please make sure to post your comments below, and please be civil. Thank you very much. Well, that's me. I'm Andrew Barringer, reporting from Washington, D.C. for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now, with 2 out of 3 branches already Republican, PCM founder Jimmy Young and Morgan Fox, the political director for NORML, talked about what's next.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News for a post-election special. I am PCM founder Jimmy Young, and I'm so happy to be joined by Morgan Fox, the political director of NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws. So, Morgan, has NORML's cause changed? It certainly has been impacted by the results of the election, hasn't it?
Well, I think that our mission remains the same, is to protect cannabis consumers and change laws, and we've always been the underdogs. While I think that there's some legitimate concern that cannabis policy reform could slow down in the 119th Congress, particularly with Mike Johnson at the helm of the House. We're still going to continue doing exactly what we have been doing. And, we do have a president-elect who has voiced some support for us. What I'm more concerned about is the appointees. And, as we've seen in the last Trump administration, those weren't particularly great for us. That being said, we are kind of riding on a wave of popular support and, growing support among the elected class and the public officials that we're going to have to deal with. So, I think it's really just going to be incumbent on advocates across the board to make sure that lawmakers and policymakers at every level of government recognize that not only are these policy reforms the right thing to do, but are also personally beneficial to them. Prioritization is really the key. And, we've seen that even when Democrats were in charge, we did not get the prioritization that we wanted to. We saw a lot more movement than we have in the past over the last couple of years, but this certainly was not a priority issue. And so, now it's incumbent upon us, if we want to continue to see forward progress, to not only make sure that lawmakers see that this is a priority issue, but I think that we also have to focus on our strengths. If we're looking at the ballot initiatives, we saw that the Dakotas lost, Florida narrowly lost, even though more than 1.2 million people voted for it than didn't vote for it. But we also saw victories at the local level for decriminalization and depenalization in a number of cities in Texas, including Dallas, which has a population of 1.3 million, which is like more than both the Dakotas combined. We also saw a clean sweep in Kentucky localities approving medical cannabis businesses being allowed to operate there. So, I think that, while we have been really capitalizing on the increase in public support for this issue over the last decade, we might need to rethink our strategy now that we've kind of run up against the red wall and we're running out of ballot initiative states, where we really need to focus a little bit more granularly on local initiatives, as well as on making sure that lawmakers at the local, state, and federal level recognize that this is the will of the people, regardless of the outcomes of any particular state initiatives, and that there are consequences for being an obstructionist.
You can see the entire interview with Morgan Fox and Jimmy on our website, procannabismedia.com. And you'll find it on our app as well under special reports. Now let's get back to Florida. Even with Trump declaring he would vote yes on the Question 3 initiative, that state's Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, accomplished what he had set out to do: defeat the state constitutional change. The largest medical operator in Florida is TrueLeave, and that group spent over $100 million in support of Smart and Safe Yes on 3 campaign. That group released this statement after the defeat at the ballot box. Tonight, a strong majority of Floridians voted in support of legalizing recreational marijuana for adults. While the results of Amendment 3 did not clear the 60% threshold, we are eager to work with the governor and legislative leaders who agree with us on decriminalizing recreational marijuana for adults, addressing public consumption, continuing to focus on child safety, and expanding access to safe marijuana through home grow. One Florida resident who is very disappointed with the final result is Jeff Aker, our correspondent there, who is licking his wounds and pointing the finger at their governor, Ron DeSantis, who, as Jeff says, his days in office are numbered.
I'm Jeff Aker, Master Gardener from Florida for Coast to Coast Cannabis News. As you know, we lost. It was pretty close, though. We had 55.9% of the population say yes. What's sad is, what I can't help thinking about is, on the no side, Ron DeSantis used our taxpayer money to fight it. That shouldn't be right. But anyways, it was almost $1 million on both sides of the thing. So we're talking $2 million that are up in smoke. But I hope we're looking at 2 more years, maybe 2 years. It seems like the second time something goes through, it'll go through. When we got our medical program, the first time we voted on it, it didn't pass. The second time we voted on it, it passed. And in 2 years, DeSantis will be gone. So we'll have to vote good for a governor that's a little bit more lenient. With Donald Trump winning the presidency, when he said he was going to support Florida and to be good for Florida, I'm really curious to see what he does in the government to further cannabis legalization. I think he's going to do something. It's yet to see. So make sure you stay tuned to Cannabis News. We'll have the updates for you. I'm Jeff Aker, Master Gardener from Florida for Coast to Coast Cannabis News.
In fact, that Florida defeat was just one of 3 state ballot questions related to cannabis that failed at the ballot box. South and North Dakota voters both rejected adult use legalization as well. Nebraska, on the other hand, passed a medical marijuana bill, thus decriminalizing the plant medicine in that state. And for those scoring at home, that's now 39 states in the U.S. that have legal medical programs, and that adult use number continues to be stalled at 24. Now you have to wonder if and when there will be a 25th state. One state that never seems to do anything easy is Texas. In fact, some cannabis ballot questions did pass in some cities, including Dallas, and Lisa Williams has the details in her Texas Cannabis Report.
I'm Lisa Williams, founder of the Toke Agency, bringing you the Texas Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. All right, we got an election roundup going on, and we have some new wins for cannabis decriminalization. But don't get too excited about setting up shop just yet. On Tuesday night, voters in 3 cities, Dallas, Bastrop, and Lockhart said yes to decriminalizing low levels of marijuana possession. And these were decisive wins with over 60% of the voters backing the measures. Let's start with the big one. Dallas, also called the Dallas Freedom Act, passed with a 66% support. It's now officially against city rules for police to arrest or ticket anyone carrying 4 ounces or less of cannabis, as long as it's not tied to a felony investigation. And get this, the smell of weed, it can no longer be used as an excuse for search or seizure. Looks like Dallas is joining the movement to clear up some of that gray area. Let's move over to Bastrop. Sailed through with a whopping 69%. Similar story. Police are no longer arresting or citing people for basic possession. Lockhart's law even stops officers from testing whether a substance is hemp or marijuana. Here's the kicker. While decriminalization is taking off, these wins do not open up any business opportunities for those looking to join the cannabis industry. The state legislature isn't budging on expanding Texas's restrictive medical marijuana program or allowing recreational sales. Plus, with over 8,000 registered hemp sellers already, lawmakers are likely to target hemp-derived THC products in 2025. So Texas entrepreneurs may be left waiting a bit longer for the green light. Ground Game Texas, the group behind these city-level wins, is thrilled. But until the state makes broader changes, these victories are about keeping people out of jail, not bringing dispensaries to a town near you. It's a step forward, but don't go filing for that dispensary application just yet. I'm Lisa Williams, founder of the Toke Agency, bringing you the Texas Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The other state with some positive news about reform is Nebraska. Voters there approved 2 medical ballot questions, one to legalize medicinal cannabis, and the other should move the state towards a regulated medical marketplace. The first question passed with 71% of the vote, and the second passed with 67% of the voters' approval. But before Nebraskans celebrate, there is the possibility that the state Supreme Court could nullify the election results based on a legal challenge to how those signatures were collected and approved. An attorney named Daniel Gutman represents the group behind the ballot initiatives. He said it would be a travesty of democracy to halt an election based on the testimony of just 2 campaign workers. Well, that'll do it for the A block, or the first section of Cannabis Coast to Coast, but we will have plenty more state reports in the rest of the show that you can watch right now if you download our app or go to procannabismedia.com. Coming up next, our Virginia correspondent Joe Parsons and his unique spin on a disappointed election day. Plus, the DEA is hit with a federal lawsuit over their hearing procedures for the now postponed testimony on rescheduling cannabis by a research company out of Washington state. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat. Just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Elena Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the industry. I'm Elena Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Elena Pinto, and a reminder to download the PCM TV app so you can have access to the history of the fight to end cannabis prohibition with the best of weed talk news over the past 3 years. Now that we are Cannabis Coast to Coast News, we continue our state-by-state election results, and we start in Virginia, a traditional red state that turned blue in this election. Here's Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons from the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Well, Election Day is finally here, and I'm standing out in my hometown. That's right, I am in Appomattox, Virginia. A lot of people might not know this, but Appomattox is where our modern freedom began. That's right, only 2 miles from where I stand right now was the actual end of the Civil War. So when you think of freedom, you think of the town of Appomattox. Now I'm going to give you a little recap of how the election turned out here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
The Virginia election results are as followed. For the presidency, Kamala Harris took it here in Virginia with 51.8% versus Donald Trump's 46.6%. We were the only state below the Mason-Dixon line to actually remain blue, with counties like Albemarle, Richmond, and Northern Virginia to see us through. As far as the 2024 Virginia Senate race, it was Timothy Kaine versus Hung Cao. Timothy Kaine, the Democrat, has always been a champion for cannabis reform, and we hope that his continued success will allow an adult use program to launch soon. As far as the Senate, we managed to maintain Democratic control with a score of 6-5.
Well, that's going to do it from the Virginia Cannabis Connection. Once again, I am Joe Parsons. I just want to say one last thing before I go. Pro Cannabis Media and myself would like to thank everyone that took the time to come out and vote for this monumental and historic election. Cannabis was on the table no matter which side wins. So, for all of you that took the time and made your voice heard, we thank you so much. And if your party didn't win, then all you got to do is keep fighting for democracy, keep fighting for peace. And until next time, stay lifted.
With all the doom and gloom of an election day that did not bring the success the cannabis industry was hoping for, there was a different story in Kentucky. The Bluegrass State asked 106 cities and counties to vote on whether they would ban medical cannabis in their areas. Not only did that pass, but all 106 cities and counties in that state approved the program rollout in their jurisdictions unanimously. That state also announced when they will start to give out licenses to operate medical dispensaries and how that lottery will work. Over the weekend, former President Trump completed his sweep in all 7 battleground states when it was announced he had carried Arizona. As Karen Black explains, at the time of her report was still up in the air, as are other state races. But here's her Arizona cannabis report now.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. While there weren't any cannabis-related issues on the Arizona ballot November 5th, the state has certainly been in the national news and not in a good way. Arizona was one of 7 battleground states in this year's presidential election, and as of my report, still has not officially declared a winner for the country's highest office or other races, and it will likely be another week until all ballots are counted. At stake is a highly contested U.S. Senate race, which could affect the balance of power of that body. Democrat Ruben Gallego, the ex-husband of Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, is ahead, but is losing ground to Republican Carrie Lake, a former local TV news anchor who lost the 2022 governor's race to Democrat Katie Hobbs. All this drama is unfolding against a backdrop of court cases and recent rulings regarding the 2020, 22, and even 2024 elections. It's a real mess over here, so don't hold your breath. Unless, of course, you're consuming. On a lighter note, cannabis just got more convenient in the Grand Canyon state. Adult use delivery service began November 1st, 2 months ahead of the January 2025 deadline. Now, just like ordering a pizza, you can have your bud brought to you by a dispensary or contracted third party. While delivery is certainly a benefit for recreational cannabis consumers, it may deal the death blow to Arizona's already beleaguered medical cannabis program. That's all for the Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There is a new lawsuit being filed against the DEA over their latest hearing procedures or rescheduling cannabis to Schedule 3. David Hildreth, the CEO of Panacea Plant Services, says that the DEA's procedures of soliciting testimony for that hearing on December 2nd was unlawful on many fronts. He asked for a stay on any further hearings and testimony. This is the supposedly last hearing before the DEA rules on moving cannabis to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act. And now that hearing is still scheduled for December 2nd. They've just postponed testimony as a delaying tactic. So while the hearing is about the Controlled Substances Act, it seems like the DEA is more about controlling the process than the substance itself. Jason Greninger is a research scientist out of Las Vegas who has paired cannabis treatments for specific strains of the plant.
Scheduling means control. It's the Controlled Substances Act, the CSA, and that means control. That's the first word, and people need to understand that's what's happening. It's a mission of control. It was out of their control when they said it had no value whatsoever, and we knew it did, and the states got to get around that and got around what they called Schedule 1 somehow by making the rules and legislation that they have in place. But they are trying now to put it in a box for Schedule 3, which is a different level of control. And there's nothing outside of that box that exists that allows you to not be a criminal if you're not getting it through your provider and through your insurance, or at least through your provider and access through that system. Okay, so they're about to take it all away, in my opinion. But there's no framework that exists to do what they say and we think can actually happen. Their Schedule 3 means controlled, and that means provided by a provider and managed by pharma.
There is a movement to deschedule, not reschedule, the plant after 70% of the public comments the DEA solicited months ago reflected that statement. Needless to say, no matter what the result was going to be on Tuesday of last week, you knew the stock market would be impacted. Cannabis stocks took a real hit again, and that volatility is not going to stop anytime soon. Doug Miller is our man who is high on Wall Street. Here's what happened to some of the publicly traded cannabis stocks.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Cannabis stocks tanked after Election Day results after failing to pass legalization in Florida, North Dakota, and South Dakota, and the possibility of marijuana reform under Trump's presidency. The American Cannabis Operator Index, which includes 9 U.S. publicly traded cannabis companies, was down nearly 27%. MSOS Pure U.S. Cannabis ETF was down to $4.89, and entering the basement as it dips. YOLO, another cannabis ETF, was down to $2.79, and that's down at the bottom. And Canopy Growth had earnings, and their stock dipped, and it's pulling back. So we have to watch for the bottom and wait for these bad boys to want to bounce back, and I'll keep you posted about that. So that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast, I'm Doug Miller.
With 24 states in the U.S. already in the adult use of cannabis sales market and now 39 implementing or continuing their medicinal cannabis programs, it should come as no surprise that more Americans are using the plant medicine than ever before. A recent Gallup poll released this past week concludes that the total of use of cannabis by adults is now at 15%, which is 1% more than last year. But since 2013, that usage figure has increased by 8%. As for adults who admit they have at least tried cannabis, that figure was just 4% in 1969. That experimental trend continued until 1985, when it was 35%. And now 47% of adults admit they have at least tried weed in some capacity. One state that continues to see their cannabis market thrive is Michigan. Amy Carter tells us that there are still some political races that have yet to be called. Here's Amy.
I am Amy Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I have the latest updates on cannabis legislation from across Michigan following Election Day. On November 5th, several proposals regarding marijuana businesses were put to the voters, with mixed results across various counties. In Barron County, Niles Township saw a significant shift as a proposal to lift a ban on marijuana businesses passed with 52% of the vote, allowing for a minimum of 4 retail locations, 1 secure transporter, and 1 safety compliance lab. Meanwhile, Royalton Township bid to permit 3 growers and processor licenses failed with only 44% in support. Moving to Gladwin County, Tobacco Township approved a proposal to allow marijuana businesses with a very narrow margin, a difference of only 15 votes. However, in Ingham County, Mason, a charter amendment for 2 retailers was rejected, receiving just 43% of the vote. Howell in Livingston County saw a proposal for 2 retailers fail with 48% in favor. In Monroe County, Bedford Township attempted to repeal a ban on marijuana businesses that fell flat with only 36% approval. Erie Township also saw a proposal to allow retail with only 40% support. In Oakland County, Clawson made headlines with a successful proposal to allow 2 marijuana retailers, passing with 54% of the vote. However, Lathrop Village had 2 proposals fall with results in the low 40s. Interestingly, Royal Oak Township saw a proposal to ban marijuana businesses fail, while Washtenaw County, their request for licenses to grow and process also did not pass, with just 38% support. As the landscape of cannabis legislation continues to evolve, these results reflect on the ongoing debate and varied opinions surrounding marijuana businesses in Michigan. That's it for this week. I'm Amy Carter with Michigan Weedsters for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
A very interesting research report by the University of Buffalo thinks the failed war on drugs that preached just say no should be changed to just say educate. After all, with more people using cannabis for medicinal purposes and the advent of more legal adult use of the product, the focus for public health should be education and not punishment. A paper published in the American Journal of Public Health by Dr. Daniel Kruger believes that as society starts to accept that cannabis legalization is inevitable at some point, the public needs to know about how to use the product safely. Kruger concluded that we should move toward harm reduction and health promotion using already existing tools with which public health practitioners are familiar with. He also recognized the complexities of this plant with over 150 cannabinoids being discovered over the past decade or so. He thinks medical researchers and consumers should move away from a focus on THC, the intoxicating cannabinoid, to some of the newly discovered minor cannabinoids. So now let's check in on the tribal nations and the political balance in Nevada, where Tina Tasaka reports from this week.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Voters in Nevada cast ballots in the state's 4 congressional districts for House seats, and here are the final results. All 4 winners were incumbents. Mark Amade, Republican, fully supports the SAFE Banking Act. Dina Titus, Democrat, has fully supported dispensaries and the SAFE Banking Act. Stephen Horsford, Democrat, has commented on efforts to move cannabis to Schedule III. Susie Lee, Democrat. And Jackie Rosen, Nevada Senator. Jackie narrowly defended her Senate seat. She has been a strong advocate for cannabis reform in Congress. In the past, she has proposed the legislation that is endorsed by NORML, Americans for Prosperity, and the Last Prisoner Project. With Florida rejecting Amendment 3 in legalizing adult cannabis use for the state, did this have an impact to Nevada's Planet 13? Planet 13 remains committed to expanding within the state and recently posted a Q3 net loss of $7.4 million, a marked improvement from last year's $46.3 million loss, while revenue rose 30% to $32.2 million, driven by its Florida market entry. Co-CEO Larry Scheffler emphasized plans for growth through expanded stores and distribution of HaHa edibles. By September 30th, the company held $243 million in assets and $27.4 million in cash, with liabilities of $92.3 million. In tribal news, on Election Day 2024, 178 Native candidates appeared on ballots across 24 states out of an initial 250 candidates at the start of the season. This marks a 44% increase in Native representation since the 2022 midterms, according to Advanced Native Political Leadership. Of these candidates, 95 are Democrats, 21 Republicans, 3 independents, and 59 represent WION. In the U.S. House, 9 indigenous candidates, including several incumbents, and here are the highlights. Incumbent Republican Josh Breachin, Choctaw Nation, representing Oklahoma, 2nd District. Incumbent Tom Cole, Chickasaw Nation, representing Oklahoma, 4th District. Cole was elected to Congress in 2002 and is serving his 10th term. He is the longest-serving Native American lawmaker in House history. Incumbent Sharice Davids, Ho-Chunk Nation, Kansas, 3rd District. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block of this week. Cannabis Coast to Coast News is coming up with the final section, and we have the story of the new executive director of Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission and an annual growing cup competition called the Harvest Cup that drew thousands of people to the DCU Center in Worcester, Massachusetts, to compete for the best strains, edibles, concentrates, pre-rolls, and a few other categories. Stay with us.
Boston-based corporation with damn nuts. Damn nuts. Damn
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to the C Block, or final section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Elena Pinto, and our last reminder to download our free app called PCM TV. It'll give you access to the latest news and the archived best of PCM programming over the past 3 years. Yes, it is available at the App Store and Google Play. Okay. First up is Ohio and Christina Brisson, whose state is dealing with a supply shortage of flower as adult use continues to fuel that market to the point of too much demand compared to its supply. Here's Christina with election results in that state, sponsored by Yellow Labs, now available in 40 dispensaries right now.
In Willow Creek, Rory, renowned for birdwatching, embraced nature's elegance. Preparing for his woodland sojourn, he used Grape Focus THC Mist from Yellow Labs. Each spritz honed his senses, capturing avian beauty. Immersed in the forest symphony, Rory's lens froze vibrant moments. Emerging at twilight, gratitude filled him for the mist's clarity. Recalling, find Yellow Labs near you. Rory ordered more of his mist.
I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. It was a red vote across the state of Ohio this election day, with Trump taking office and U.S. Senator J.D. Vance now being vice president-elect. Sherrod Brown also lost out to Bernie Moreno with the U.S. Senate seat. And the Supreme Court is now 6-1 Republican as well. But that's not the only news. Hubbard, Ohio, who I mentioned previously on the show, who had a ban against adult use recreational sales, had their vote this election day, and they voted to lift that ban. So the fight's definitely still on. That is your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report, with more news to come. I am Christina Brisson with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Ohio Cannabis Report is supported by Yellow Labs and Better Ways to THC.com. Search for Yellow Labs near me and find one of 40 dispensaries in Ohio carrying these amazing mists and creams.
Now let's check in on Arkansas, where a ballot question there to expand their existing medical program got shut down by that state's Supreme Court. Unfortunately, that decision came a little too late to stop the printing of the question on the ballots. No matter how many votes are cast, though, they will not be counted. Kevin Shakir is the Shake Man and has more from Arkansas.
Good day to you. This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News, the report from Arkansas with Kevin Shakir, aka the Shake Man. Just want to give you again the 411 on the results from Arkansas. Basically, we can't get them. They're ghost. They won't ever appear simply because of the ruling, again, by the Arkansas Supreme Court. They let us know that for some reason, and I would definitely say it's the political climate that's going on at this particular time, it was not able to be passed. There are outlets or escape situations that were used. Again, the way that the ballot was put together, the way that the wording was on the ballot, the folks that went out and gathered the signatures. This was written with a lot of context of, we don't want to do it, but we'll think of a good excuse to where we can't do it. Even though we want to see how many votes that'll come in, we don't want to really know. So every time the count was given, there was always an excuse for the count not to be counted, which is, again, counterintuitive to anybody that believes in cannabis and the culture. We asked for, again, the right to have the use as adults. As someone that has, cannabis is not new to anyone. So everyone that probably says that they haven't used it, it is a drug. It's been used by our ancestors. It's been used in modern medicine. It's used right now by plenty of folks that have seen the benefits of CBD, THC, and all the contents. So again, do we sit here and not fight for our rights? We have to fight for our rights to vote. We have to fight for our rights to use cannabis. So I urge everyone out there, especially if you're in Arkansas and other states where you're being held back as voter, as citizens of the United States. Again, as we say that we want to have these rights, and as the political climate is there, we have to also understand that we do have power against the political climate. You know, the power is in the action. So without action, it will keep on doing what it does. So, you know, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil. This is Kevin Shakur, aka the Shake Man.
Next up, we have a new correspondent from California who will be covering that state for us for a while. Her name is Dina Naguib, and she has the story of a new proposition that was passed in the Golden State. Here's Dina.
I'm Dina Naguib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In a week of plenty of national news, two stories have dominated the Golden State's landscape. One focused on criminal justice reform from the election, and the other on consumer safety. First, Californians have spoken loud and clear in support of Proposition 36, a measure that will increase criminal penalties for certain theft and drug offenses, though it does not directly affect cannabis and is focused on quote-unquote harder drugs. Prop 36 is relevant to the war on drugs and demonstrates an important shift in voters. Proposition 36 aims to take a tougher stance on crime, particularly regarding theft and more serious drug offenses. Supporters argue that the measure will help deter crime, reduce theft and drug trafficking, and increase protection for communities and businesses. However, opponents raise concerns about exacerbating California's mass incarceration problem, increasing the strain on the state's resources, and potentially deepening racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Californians are sending a message different than the one they did 10 years ago that loosened up the penalties, showing the shift in thinking, especially since the pandemic. Meanwhile, the California Department of Cannabis Control issued a recall last week on Rove Drink Loud THC shot beverages due to them being acidified beverages, which are not allowed as there is risk of botulinum toxin amongst other potential contaminant pathogens. These products have been sold for more than a year now, and the recall has just been announced, which adds to the ongoing problem in California where recalls are being announced much later than expected. That's it for California this week. See you next time. This is Dina Naguib from Grass Goddess Consulting.
This is Debbie Facey, your Canadian correspondent with the Canadian Coast to Coast News Report.
So what we have in Canada this week is the GCAC, which is the Global Compliance Applications Corp, has partnered with Athena Consulting and the Citizen Green Venture in a $167 million cannabis funding initiative, which is going to be geared towards the Veterans Affairs of Canada. This program is going to connect over 1,000 Canadian veterans to premium cannabis, and it is going to be providing each veteran with 3 grams that is going to be reimbursed by the Veterans Affairs. This is going to be something that is going to be great, especially because since recreational medical has been kind of out and there hasn't been anything when it came to financial benefits, especially for any medical and veterans. Next up we have, especially after the after the elections, the impact that we are going to be finding is that we had a 21% drop when it came to cannabis growth, 11% drop in Organigram, and an 18% drop in Aurora Cannabis when it came to the trades this week. We're not too sure if it's going to continue to decline, but hopefully it doesn't. But at the same time, we're just going to have to see what happens. Last but not least, we have the Elevate conference, which is going to be November 12th here in Toronto, Ontario. And it's a conference where it connects bud tenders and industry makers and leaders to not only connect, but also educate and to further create a culture that we hope to see benefit not only ourselves, but our consumers. The sold out conference is on November 12th. But at the same time, I will be updating you with all of the goods from that show. This is Debbie Facey with your Cannabis Coast to Coast News Report. Peace.
There's a new lead boss on the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. After 11 months, the CCC named their new executive director. His name is David Lakeman, and he actually started here in Massachusetts before leaving to join the Illinois regulatory body, and now he returns to guide the commission that has had a tumultuous existence over the past year. And finally, the end of fall is usually the time to harvest the last outdoor grows, and what better time to hold a competition called the Harvest Cup? Since 2017, growers and manufacturers flock to the DCU Center in Worcester, Massachusetts, and compete to determine who grows the best flower rolls, the best pre-rolls, concentrates, edibles, and a variety of other categories of products made from cannabis. Over 5,000 people enjoyed the variety of products that were on display. One participant every year is Caroline Frankel of Caroline's Dispensaries in Hopedale and Uxbridge. Caroline is a legend of sorts as the first social equity licensee to open in the state. I've been to her dispensary before. It's good.
Have you been to every one of these Caroline Frankel?
Single one. So I've been here since 2019. We've been to every single Harvest Cup here in Massachusetts, and it's great here today.
Is there something about this industry that you can put your finger on that actually feeds the passion that everybody has?
So what I like best about this show, Jimmy, is that it's a customer-driven show. These are the enthusiasts of Massachusetts, and they're right here in Worcester County, which is the stomping ground for my show, and you could actually feel the energy. This is one of my favorite shows here in Massachusetts.
That'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Elena Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, it's a great question because cannabis is very exciting. It's almost like, mom and pop drugstores. You could start whatever you wanted. You could be pretty successful. And then there are the business people who see the revenue potential. And those are the ones that I think that are going to become the buyers going forward. And then smaller companies will be the sellers. And then there'll be another group of like, what the heck happened? And there'll probably be some craft survivors as well. But I think, the access to capital and business, this is becoming a mature business, just like craft beer or the car industry from, the 1910s to today. Yeah, I think Schedule 3 will have radical changes. I think we're going to see consolidation in the space independent of Schedule 3. Schedule 3 will influence the flavor of the consolidation, but it's going to happen no matter what.
Will that open up more capital?
it'll open up more capital, more access. One way or another, as the industry consolidates, they're going to have to get access to capital. The buyers will, and that's going to change the markets fundamentally.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Elena Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the industry. I'm Elena Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.